Alright, what's up guys? Today we're going to be talking about what's probably the best starter 10 gigabit enabled Ethernet switch, this Netgear GS110MX switch. So there are two models of this switch, and there's a big price difference between the two of them. There's a completely unmanaged one, and there's a managed version. So the one I've got right here is the managed version, but honestly, I would say for most use cases, the unmanaged one is way worth it. So right now on Amazon, the unmanaged switch is $160, while the managed version is $250. So there's a $90 price difference there, which I don't think is worth it for the average consumer. The real thing you're going to be missing out on are VLANs, link aggregation, and quality of service stuff, but realistically, I think that it's not necessary, and a $160 switch for two 10 gigabit and 8 gigabit ports is a great deal. Plus, it's got the advantage of being completely silent because it has no fans. The one thing to note, these things do get pretty warm, so make sure not to put anything on top of it because it'll start overheating. So the switch also supports the standards of 2.5 gig, 5 gig, and 10 gig, which allows for devices to connect to it, still getting way faster than gigabit speeds, but for much cheaper and not using nearly as much power. So it's good that they've got that addition there. So really the best use case for this switch, in my opinion, is for the prosumer who's got the 10 gigabit card on their NAS and wants to be able to have that full throughput directly to one computer. It's honestly kind of a perfect setup for that. The other use case for this is a pretty good cost saving for running cable. So say you have an office with 8 computers on there, you can hook up every single one of those computers to this switch and then just run a single cable to a 10 gigabit switch to your main server room. That way, you're only running one cable the full distance rather than 8. Then if needed, you could also hook up an additional computer on there, hooked up to the 10 gigabit port that's still open for ones that need really fast file transfers. This could be something like a video editor or someone else who's just always running into bottlenecks from a gigabit connection. So I bought this switch about a year ago now, and I've been using it pretty constantly since. When I first started out, I did not have any 10 gigabit devices, but I knew I eventually was going to get them, and I really wanted to be able to have that upgrade path without worrying. And that's also the reason why I bought the Smart Managed Plus version, was I was really interested in link aggregation and wanted to be able to do dynamic link aggregation without a 10 gigabit card. And so only the Smart Managed Plus version of the switch allows you to do that. But since I've moved on to 10 gigabit, link aggregation has really not been that important to me, and so I've really not used it since. But for the longest time, it's been the backbone of my network. I have the Synology DS1819 Plus with a 10 gigabit card hooked up to it, which uses one of the 10 gigabit ports. Then the other 10 gigabit port goes directly into my main computer. And so for that one computer, I got full 10 gigabit speeds. Then for any of the ancillary devices, I was not causing any bottlenecks communicating to the Synology directly because I could have all 8 of them going at once and not being bottlenecked by the 10 gigabit port, although I would have been bottlenecked by the actual speed of the drives. So the switch actually comes with some pretty absurd looking rack ears, and it's actually what led me down the path of getting a rack. Because like, ooh, that's a nice way to clean everything up. And ever since then, I've been adding more and more devices to it. And then the other thing is, I heard that it gets hot, and so having it rack mounted means there's twice the surface area because it's open air basically, and so it keeps it cool. One of the best parts about this is you can use it in home office, and it's dead silent because it has no fans, meaning there's nothing to make noise. And so you can have it right by you without causing any issues whatsoever. So I'll be honest with you, the web interface for these Smart Managed Plus switches looks like something I wrote out of the 90s using HTML. It's like that thing you wrote when you first learned how to type in HTML, and it is just not very good. Fundamentally, it works. You can enable all the services, and it's all pretty straightforward. And so it really doesn't slow you down that much because, quite frankly, who cares? How often are you using the web interface? It's probably just set it and forget it. So it's really not that big of a deal, but it definitely looks really old. But overall, I've been incredibly satisfied with this switch, and it's really that perfect price point for starting out into cheap 10 gigabit routing without having to go into SFP+, which most consumer devices simply just don't support. And so having the 10 gigabit capabilities is awesome for this. I would highly recommend it when you're first starting out and interested in things like this, because it's that perfect price point. And whether or not those Smart Managed Plus features are worth $90 to you is just up to you. My recommendation, save the $90 and just get the cheaper one, because really there's very few use cases where you're really going to need it. All right, well that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. Have a good one. Bye.